Welcome, everyone. I'm Kimberly Voshman, and this is the Intentionally Intuitive Podcast. In this episode, we're going to take a look at the forecast for the week of December 2nd. We are officially in the month of December. Can you believe it? So let's break this down a little bit. We're going to be working with the energy of the 13-4 for the cycle this week. And anytime we move through a cycle of the 13-4, it can bring in this need for some kind of release, some kind of transformation, building towards something better. In tarot, the 13 is represented by the death card, right? So there is something that has to, fall away, be released, to die out in order for something to be rebuilt that's more foundational, that's more stable, that's more aligned, to be built in its place. So it's a very foundational energy. And with the 4, right, the 4 is also very foundational. It's at the core of this vibration. And though we tend to think of 4 energy as, building block type of energy, it's the workhorse, it's, very stable, it's very methodical, it's organized, et cetera, right? It's a very physical type of energy in what it is aiming to build, okay? Building some kind of legacy, building some kind of strong foundation. What we don't tend to focus on a lot with this vibration is what's at the core of it, right? The 4 energy is a very heart-led, very intuitive type of energy. It's the 4th chakra, which is the heart center, right? The 4th chakra is the heart center. So at the core of this very foundational, solid energy of the 4 is emotions. It's the core of who we are, right? It's our emotional well-being. It's our, emotional foundation as well. And so anytime we move through a 4 cycle, though there can be other aspects, of course, that show up that are the signatures of this vibration, there can always be this element of having to look at or move through, our emotions and to work with them in a way that actually gets us to a healthier place, and not to dismiss our emotions, not to bypass them or suppress them, but to work with them in a big way. And it's interesting because this week, there's a very strong focus energetically on the emotions and how we work with this charged energy, which is our emotions. So the goal this week is to help us to see where it is that we could use a little bit more of emotional maturity, right? And here's the thing, emotions are something that we all deal with. We all have this charged energy coursing through us. And it doesn't have to be anger or rage, right? It can be, excitement or even frustration or joy or whatever, right? It can be these, either side of the spectrum, either side of the polarity, but it's still going to be that charged energy. If we're not in a state of centeredness, of neutrality, of calm, then we are in one of these charged energies, right? Of our emotions. And every human has this to some degree, has this charged energy moving through them that they're meant to work with. We are meant to work with this energy. And the more that we work with it, the stronger our foundation becomes, right? Not only the physical foundation, but the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the intuitive foundation, right? We as a whole. So this is a big aspect of who we are. Our emotions drive us in so many ways. And so we're meant to work with them and find a way to work with them that not only serves us, but serves others who come into contact with us as well. So the goal here, again, is to help us to see where it is that we might be lacking in that emotional maturity. And it's not like a judgment, right? There's no shame involved. It's just showing us where we need to step up a little bit. We need to do a little bit more work. We need to, work with our emotions more to understand them better. And this is a solo project. This is something that we can get help and assistance with, but it's our responsibility to take that lead. And only we can do that work to be able to manage our emotions, to regulate them in a way that serves not only us, but those who come in contact with us. So again, this week could be showing us where it is that we are lacking that emotional maturity, where it is that we could handle things better when it comes to managing this charged energy, whatever it may be. And usually the way this works is situations or circumstances present themselves that trigger that charged, emotion, that charged electricity. And then we figure out how to work with it, right? And we can pay attention to how we're working with it, right? Like what's our immediate reaction or immediate response? And that can cue us into, oh, you know what? I've got a little bit more work to do here. I've got a little bit more, I need to make some changes here instead of, getting frustrated with the outcome of how we managed that charged energy. So this week, it could bring in situations where, again, could be a little bit emotionally charged or create situations that are a little bit emotionally charged. And it's up to us to figure out how to work with that energy, how to respond, not react. So yeah, interesting week ahead for sure. But it could feel intense, right? Anytime we're talking about emotions, it brings up this intensity, or it can bring up this intensity. And the goal of this 13-4, the cycle this week, is to help us to manage that, to work with it, to find out a solution that works for, again, ourselves and all involved. And this allows us, this sort of managing or regulating our emotions, allows us to have a better chance at responding, not reacting when things don't go our way or when we don't get what we want, right? Now, when we react from the state of charged emotion, we aren't thinking clearly, and we certainly aren't able to tune into our intuition to see how we truly feel about something. So we end up making decisions and taking actions that we can actually oftentimes regret once that charged energy becomes more neutralized, once it becomes more stable. When we become reactive and sometimes defensive, rather than approaching the situation with a calm, clear headspace, we get the results that mimic our reaction, right? So again, if we're reacting or responding in a way that's coming from a calm, centered space, then we're going to get the results that are most aligned with the direction we want to be moving in. If we're reacting or responding from a place of that charged energy, then the result of that is going to carry that same vibration. And so more than likely, we'll have some kind of buyer's remorse there or some kind of regret, potentially, not always. But it's hard to get a good read on something and what the outcome will be in order to make a stable decision and a sound decision when we're moving from that place of that charged energy, right? So the goal is to be able to move through this energy, work with it, get to a place of neutrality, get to a place of that centeredness, then make our decisions, then decide how we want to act, how we want to, respond, and move from there. And that creates usually an outcome that's much more aligned, much more fulfilling, much more, of what we want to see. So the energy this week is kind of teaching us or showing us how to best work with our emotions so that we can get the results that we actually want to see. And we don't have to spend so much time cleaning up, from our reactions. Rarely are we taught how to regulate our emotions. It's not really something that we're taught in school. It's not really something we're taught, by parents, by the community, by society. If anything, most people are moving from not knowing how to work fully with this charged energy that we all have within us, right? This charged electricity that's looking for a channel, that's looking for an outlet. And so we have to kind of figure it out through trial and error. which doesn't always create the best results, but that's where we're at this point. And I'm not saying that's not happening, that we're not, that there aren't parents teaching their children how to regulate their emotions, that there's not, that it's not happening. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying collectively on a global scale, it's not happening. We're a bunch of, basically charged electricity running around, spouting out this energy, as opposed to working with it in a really constructive way. Because again, we're not really taught how to do that. The energy of emotions is one of the strongest forces that we work with in this lifetime. And, figuring out how to manage it is part of the journey, truly, because each person's going to be a little bit different in how they work with their own charged electricity, their own emotions, and what works for them. So because we are moving from that place of reactivity, we're often unsatisfied with the results, right, of those actions. When we can't manage our emotions, we tend to lash out at others, not knowing what to do with this big energy that we're feeling. So we just end up throwing it out at others to deal with. People start to feel like they need to tiptoe around us so that they don't upset us or hurt our feelings. So they start to change who they are so that they can manage our emotions for us. And they don't sort of bear the brunt of that charged energy, not knowing when it's going to strike. But the problem with that, of course, is that we don't get authentic, true connections, because those connections aren't showing up truthfully and authentically with us because they're afraid of how we're going to react, right? And, and everybody sort of experience this in their lifetime, where they're dealing with someone who can't manage their emotions, and so they monitor that, they try to manage it for them. They change who they are to accommodate that other person so that they don't have to bear the brunt of that charged energy, right? And the more that we as a society can learn to better manage our own emotions, moving towards emotional maturity, the less separation and division, the less wars, the less fighting, the less pettiness, and the less destruction that we'll see. Because again, emotions are charged energy, and that charged energy is going to find an outlet whether we try to suppress it or not. We can either let our emotions control us, or we can control our emotions. And we can create better outlets to sort of transmute that energy into something constructive, while also paying better attention to what those emotions are trying to tell us about our experience, to tell us about ourselves, so that we can then find a better solution. So the best way to sort of gauge where we are at personally on our own path to emotional maturity is to pay attention to how we react when we don't get what we want, or when someone says or does something that we don't like or that we disagree with. How do we handle that? Because that's a really good indicator for how we manage our own emotions. So it's easy to respond in an emotionally mature way when things are working out, when things are working in our favor. The true test is when things aren't. So again, how we choose to manage our emotions affects every single relationship in our life, to family, friends, colleagues, partners, etc. Even the relationship with ourselves. And it's our sole responsibility to manage those emotions. It's not our responsibility to try to manage someone else's by making ourselves small in order to sort of accommodate or mitigate their emotional output. And no one is responsible to do that for us either, right? We wouldn't want someone to, have to tiptoe around us. I wouldn't think. We wouldn't want someone to tiptoe around us to make sure that we're, that we're not having an outburst. Emotions are a powerful thing. They truly, truly are. They're not a bad thing. They're not a good thing. They are just an energy that we are working with in this lifetime, a very potent, very strong energy. Again, very charged energy that we're working with in this lifetime. And there is power behind that. When we can harness that energy and do good with it, right? Like channel it into something, transmute it into something very powerful, very constructive as opposed to destructive, we can really change our lives. And we can really change the lives of those around us, right? And how they show up to us and the relationships that we can have. So this is a big, it sounds like it's one of those sort of just fluff topics, but it's really like, it really is at the core of who we are. At the core of our being is this charged energy. And when we can work it's kind of like that, I think about like Mickey Mouse, like the sorcerer, right? Mickey Mouse sorcerer or whatever. When he found out he was a sorcerer and trying to figure out how to use his magic, it's interesting because like that charged energy of emotions can really be like our magic. And if we channel our energy, our that charged electricity into constructive, positive things, we get things like art. We get things like music. Creativity can flow through emotions. That's why some of the songs that we get, or some of the paintings or whatever, some of the art, some of the creations that we see, some of the best work is when those emotions are being channeled into that work, as opposed to being thrown on, bystanders, So it's really a beautiful cycle to work with. This truly is a beautiful cycle to work with. And this is a beautiful aspect of the 4, because it does really bring in those opportunities to see where it is that, we have some work to do personally when it comes to our own magic, our own charged energy that we're meant to harness and work with in a really positive way. So again, it is our personal responsibility to manage our own emotions. It's not our responsibility to try to manage someone else's, nor is it theirs to manage ours. This energy asks us to work with and through those emotions and step into that greater maturity so that we can have better, happier, healthier relationships with less regrets, with a clear mind and a clear channel to our own personal center, our intuition, which will ultimately lead to making better choices all around. Choices that feel the most aligned for us and that we can ultimately feel good about. So again, the best way to gauge our own or someone else's emotional maturity level is to see how they react when they don't get their way. If they react like a child throwing a tantrum, then this is what you'll get when you aren't sacrificing yourself to accommodate them. It's our responsibility to do better by managing our own emotions and not expecting someone else to do that for us. If we as a collective could sort of figure out how and like what works for us to regulate those emotions and to work with our own emotions, because again, I think it's going to be different for everyone. Like there's a base there, right? There's a base to move from. But for each person, how we feel, how those emotions run through us, how we can best create, the better outlet for those emotions, it's going to be different for each person. And how we choose to, what outlet we choose to take, what works best, is going to be different for each person. And again, that kind of comes a little bit through trial and error. But it's that awareness that we do have the power to harness that energy and to actually do really good things with it that then creates the motivation to start that process. So yeah, if we can be constructive with this energy as opposed to destructive, then imagine how much calmer, how much more harmonious the world would be. But again, it's up to each individual to start that process, to start that journey. And it does start with each person. So again, the vibe of this week can be a little bit intense. It can feel a little bit intense, but that's sort of like, you got to feel it to figure out what to do with it, right? If you kind of keep suppressing it, it's going to find an outlet. And when it comes to making decisions, when we are moving from a place of a clear mind and an open heart, we're going to make the best decisions that are the most aligned for us in that moment. If we're moving from a place of charged energy, we'll likely have some buyer's remorse there. So the vibe this week tells us to work through our shit rather than throwing it at other people. So I hope it's a great week. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.